Welcome back to another horror movie review and kill tier list, and in this one we're continuing the Leprechaun franchise with Leprechaun 3. Now if you watched my previous two videos, you know that I am generally a big fan of this franchise as they have a lot of nostalgia for me, but that was the first two movies. This one, not so much. But we will get more into that as the video goes on. If you haven't seen this movie before, there are obvious spoilers ahead, so if you don't want that ruined for you, click away now. And of course, these are just my opinions and mine only, so if you don't share them, that's totally fine. But please let me know in the comments what you think about this movie and what you think about the kills themselves. Leprechaun 3 is a 1995 horror and comedy film directed by Brian Trenchard Smith, and this now makes 3 years in a row that a Leprechaun movie has been released, which generally is never a good sign. If you're familiar with the plot of the first two, really nothing much has changed for this third movie. Basically, at some point, the Leprechaun loses one gold coin, and whenever he's counting all of his gold, realizes that, and then goes on the hunt for that missing gold coin and kills a bunch of people on the way. Except this time, it takes place in Las Vegas and primarily a casino, which might not sound like the greatest thing when you first hear it, but it's honestly one of the more redeeming things about this movie because it offers up some funny moments with the Leprechaun. Of course, the amazing Warwick Davis is back to take on his role as the Leprechaun. We also have John Gattens playing the role as Scott, Lee Armstrong playing the role as Tammy, and the horror icon herself, Carolyn Williams, playing Loretta. This movie starts off with a man bringing a leprechaun statue into a pawn shop. The statue happens to have a medallion around its neck, and the man tells the pawn shop owner, whatever you do, do not remove the medallion. The pawn shop owner, who I believe his name is Gupta, of course does not listen to the man and immediately removes the medallion to inspect it. When he does so, this allows the leprechaun to come back to life, and whenever the shop owner turns around, he is gone, and a pot of gold is in his place. He takes the pot of gold and starts looking at it, but when he does, the leprechaun comes up from behind him and bites his ear. He then starts whacking the man with a mallet and eventually even bites his toes. However, once the shop owner flashes the medallion, it's clear this has a great effect on the leprechaun as he takes his gold and runs away. However, when he does so, he accidentally drops one coin and leaves it behind. After that, we meet our two main characters, Scott and Tammy, where he almost hits her with his car and then tries to help fix her car. Back at the pawn shop, we see Gupta researching the legend of the Leprechaun. Meanwhile, the Leprechaun is down in the basement counting all of his gold when he realizes that he's missing one gold coin.
I'm 1 shilling short!
After that, he then hides the rest of his gold inside of a safe. After that, we see the shop owner heading down to the basement where he finds the gold coin and picks it up, but then continues down to go look for the rest. While he's searching the basement, the leprechaun creates an illusion of himself to trick Gupta. This gives the real leprechaun enough time to move what I believe is a Cupid statue, where he pulls the arrow, shooting Gupta in the arm, causing him to drop the medallion. He then sticks his finger inside of his gun, causing it to explode back on him, and just when you think the leprechaun might have the upper hand, the shop owner takes the medallion and shoves it in his mouth, causing him to foam and run away once more. We then see Scott and Tammy where he's dropping her off at the casino where she happens to work as a magician's assistant. Since he's under 21 and has never gotten to experience a casino, he asks Tammy to sneak him in. Hesitant at first, she eventually does so, but tells him just don't gamble. We then meet the magician whose name is Fazio, as well as Loretta who works inside of the casino. Back at the casino, we see Scott pull out a check from his parents that's worth $23,000 that they gave him for tuition and housing, but of course he plans to cash it all and gamble. And of course he gets that gambling bug and blows almost all of his money, leaving him with just a couple hundred left. At the pawn shop, Gupta has left the basement door opening, allowing the leprechaun to come upstairs. They discuss a trade in which Gupta will receive half the leprechaun's gold as long as he gives up the medallion. After they agree on the trade, the leprechaun shows that he's not so much of a fair man and steals the medallion, making Gupta completely vulnerable. Leprechaun then chases him around while beating him with a baseball bat, and eventually strangles him with the phone cord as Gupta goes to call for help.
No! What was I thinking? With all this killing, I've lost me shilling!
So for the very first kill of Leprechaun 3, where does it rank on this tier list? It's not any of the bottom two. It's probably going to be average. Average. About as average as you can get. I think all three of these movies have started with average so far, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. There's just not a whole lot special to this. It's kind of similar in Leprechaun 2 with Morty and how his greed gets the best of him. If it wasn't for Morty's greed, he probably wouldn't have died. If it wasn't for Gupta's greed wanting his gold, he probably wouldn't have died. He could have just let the Leprechaun go and keep that medallion around him to keep himself safe. So I do like that, but it also was a little redundant. And also with the phone cord, we haven't seen him kill anyone with that yet, but again, in Leprechaun 2, we saw the Leprechaun try to kill Cody with the phone cord. Except that one was cooler because he used magic, whereas this one was just him. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's very aggressive and kind of violent. A little corny when he's hitting him with the bat, but the actual kill itself is not too bad. But there's nothing special about it, which puts it into average. Not great, nothing crazy, not bad, just average. After the Leprechaun kills the shop owner, we see Scott, who has come in to pawn off his watch so he can get more money to gamble. However, he stumbles across the dead body and calls the cops. After he sets the phone down, it accidentally plays the Leprechaun video that the shop owner was watching before. Scott then picks up the gold coin he sees on the keyboard, and as that happens, the video is telling him that if he finds the Leprechaun coin, he gets one wish for each coin he has. Not thinking much of it, he sarcastically wishes himself back at the casino on a winning streak, and that's exactly what happens. Scott then teleports back to the casino where he is winning big. He places the gold coin on his stack of chips, and whenever he does so, it ends up magically moving it to the correct winning location for him. Loretta notices this and knows that something must be up with that coin. She tries to rig the game against him, but it doesn't work and ends up breaking. This now angers Mitch, the casino owner, as he's clearly losing big money. And what makes this even worse for him is earlier we saw two men approach him at his own casino demanding money that he owes them. Mitch ends up giving Scott a free key to the hotel so he can keep him here and eventually get his money back. When Scott shows Tammy all of his earnings and brags about it even though she told him not to gamble, Loretta overhears Tammy talking to Scott and she makes a plan to go steal the money with Fazio the magician. We then see the Leprechaun finally arrive at the casino where he has a funny interaction with an Elvis impersonator.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Once inside, he ends up playing a real magic trick on the phony magician Fazio by making green feces appear in his hand. The Leprechaun then starts gambling and having fun at the casino, as every Leprechaun does, when those two guys who were demanding money from Mitch approach him. One of the guys, who I believe's name is Tony, ends up putting his hands on the Leprechaun, which was a bad idea because he turns Tony into a human slot machine. Inside Scott's hotel room, we see Fazio sneaking in, snooping through his stuff, looking for the money that Loretta said was there, but he finds none of that and only takes the gold coin. When Scott comes out to try to stop him, he throws his clothes at him and makes a getaway. After the magician leaves, the Leprechaun comes into Scott's room and demands his gold coin.
I smell me shelling. Tell me where it is, or there'll be another killing.
The Leprechaun goes to attack Scott and ends up biting him on his arm. However, when he's latched onto his arm, Scott picks up a knife and stabs him in the forehead. This causes the Leprechaun to let go and bleed this green ooze into the open wound on Scott's arm. Scott begins to feel ill, and when he goes to the bathroom and looks in the mirror, we can see glimpses of him turning into a leprechaun himself. Scott eventually even gets this sudden urge to eat potatoes. All sorts of potatoes, in fact.
Potato, broiled potato, French fries, potato skin, potato salad, and 6 potato pancakes.
And just a little fun fact, the waitress who gives him all these potatoes is Lee Allen Baker, who a lot of younger people might know as the mom from Good Luck Charlie. Back at the casino, Loretta tries to show Fazio that the coin is magic, however once she demonstrates it for him, it doesn't work. Eventually, the angry owner Mitch comes by and they get into an argument about how she still hasn't gotten his money back from Scott. They then start arguing, calling each other fat, and Mitch tells her that if he wanted, he could have any girl he wants. He says that he could even have Tammy if he wanted her. Mitch flips the coins and says, "Yeah, I wish." This enacts the coin's magic, causing Tammy to become infatuated with Mitch. Once Loretta sees this, she's dumbfounded and knows for sure now that that coin must be magic. Loretta follows them up to the room where Tammy is stripping for Mitch, and she starts going through his coat to steal his coin. Once she successfully steals the coin and leaves the room, this makes it so Tammy is no longer under the magic spell. Confused and angry as to how she got here, she knees Mitch in the balls where he fires her, and she takes off running. After Tammy leaves the room, the Leprechaun enters and he starts controlling the TV, making it so a woman appears on screen and ends up seducing Mitch.
What do you need her for, Mitch? When you can have me?
The woman even says Mitch's name and eventually comes through the TV. As he's making out with the imaginary magical woman, commercials start playing on the TV that feature the leprechaun, and they too keep calling out Mitch's name. He ignores it for the first couple times, but after the third time he sits up, and whenever he leans back down, the woman on top of him has turned into a robot. The leprechaun himself then appears and causes the robot to malfunction, which eventually electrocutes and kills Mitch. Okay, so Mitch's kill is actually pretty difficult for me to rank. There's a couple things that I like about it and a lot that I don't. For now, I'm gonna put it in C below Gupta's kill. The first thing that I like is Mitch died. The dude was a genuine asshole and it was refreshing to see him die. That's generally not what you want from a horror movie. You would like to cheer for the victims, but it's a horror comedy slasher, it's the Leprechaun. There's exceptions being made. However, I just don't think it was done well. If you wanted to do an execution, you could have done it differently. I think maybe if you had it to where like the girl was enticing him through the TV and reaches out and Mitch is like, oh man, is this real? He goes to the TV and the leprechaun pushes it on him and electrocutes him that way. Kind of like Stu from Scream. That was pretty cool. But even if you didn't want to go that route and you wanted to keep this weird sex robot thing, it just didn't look that good. It kind of looked like sparklers flying around. Didn't really look like a good execution. Electrocution. I guess he was executed too. And then it just left weird burn marks on him. Looked like he was just sleeping in the bed. It just didn't really... It didn't go too well. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm going to put this in poorly executed. So I think it is going to go to D. Because, yeah, it was just poorly executed. And it just felt like another reason to put a naked girl in a horror movie. That, I will say, that hasn't been a thing with the Leprechaun. You know, I think this was like the first time you actually saw, okay, second time you saw nudity in this franchise. But, yeah, it just kind of felt like a dumb excuse to do that. And the sex robot that she turned into was just weird. Like, it just had, like, fake silicone boobs and everything else was metal. I probably can't even show that on YouTube, but... yeah, just, I think poorly executed is a perfect definition. It's not so bad that it should have been cut from the movie. It's kind of borderline D and C. If I could put it right in the middle, I would. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to put it in D tier. Immediately after that happens, Scott and Tammy break into his room to confront him about firing Tammy, and the leprechaun attacks. However, Scott manages to throw something at him so they can quickly get away, and as soon as that happens, the two bullies who are looking to get money from Mitch come in. Tony is insulting the way that the leprechaun looks, only for him to tell him that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and then he stabs him in the eye and rips it out. Art pulls out his gun and goes to shoot the leprechaun, but gets it knocked out of his hands by the leprechaun's shillelagh. After that, the leprechaun then proceeds to beat both Tony and Art over and over again with his shillelagh until he kills them both. Oh boy. So these kills, we're going to have two. We're going to have obviously Art here and Tony here. I think Art technically was killed first, so that's why he's in here. There's one redeeming thing about this, and that is Tony's eye getting ripped out. Other than that, these suck. I'm just going to tell you right now, they both should be cut from the movie. We're not even going to debate this. I'm not going to take much time. There's just nothing here. There's no blood. There's no gore. Okay, that's not always the worst thing. But then you got to be creative with it, especially in a leprechaun kill. He just beats them with a shillelagh. That's it. There's really no funny... there's some funny one-liners with the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I do like that. The Judy Garland line did make me chuckle, because deep down in it, I don't think they were trying to be malicious with it, but just because I'm a big fan of that movie and know what happened to Judy Garland, it's just, yeah, it didn't sit well. Other than those two kind of comedic lines, they're just plain and they suck, and honestly, there's no need for them. Like, I don't even know why these two characters were in the movie. They have no significance to the film at all. The only thing they're here for is that I guess Mitch, who was killed previously, owes them money, and they were coming to get it. That's it. You literally didn't need this. There's like another scene where they're sitting there talking to themselves, and he's talking about how he wears a garter and it makes him feel like a sissy or something. I don't know. I just didn't care for these two characters. Even seeing them die, I didn't like get joy out of it because they weren't great kills. Like, yeah, just sucked. Very bad, and didn't enjoy them. Just no point in my opinion. Outside, after Scott and Tammy have escaped, we see Scott visibly turning into a leprechaun at this point, and he believes that if he wants to find the answer, he needs to go back to the pawn shop where all of this first started. As they head to the pawn shop, we cut back to Loretta's room where she wishes for her to be beautiful and to be quote-unquote stacked like a 20-year-old. Her wish, of course, comes true, and she comes strutting out with brand new hair and brand new boobs. She goes into Fazio's dressing room to show him just exactly how magical this coin really is, and once he notices that it does work, he steals it from her. To test it out, Fazio then wishes that he was the greatest magician in the world. We head back into the dressing room where Loretta is admiring herself in the mirror, and then the leprechaun appears. He kills Loretta by giving her a little bit too much of what she wants, and he makes her breasts, lips, and butt grow to an extreme amount. She gets so big that she tries to go and escape through a door but can't and gets stuck, only for the leprechaun to pull out an umbrella because she's about to explode. Now, this kill, I got a feeling some people might disagree with me on, maybe not. I got a feeling most people would probably put it in average, maybe even D. I'm gonna put it bare minimum in good. Honestly, I might even put this in A. I'm not quite sure yet, but for now we'll leave it in B. I understand this looks pretty stupid, but I think that's kind of why I like it. And maybe that's because we really haven't had anything in this movie that stands out yet, and then all of a sudden we get this, like an hour or something into the movie. And as stupid as it looks, it does look cool. Yeah, her lips and butt and boobs look fake, but I think that's kind of the point because they are fake. And there's also a lot of nostalgia with this kill. Even though I do not like this movie very much, I always remember this kill. There's 2 kills throughout this whole franchise that I always remember off the top of my head. That's the pogo on your lung from the original and Loretta's. I don't know why, I just always remember this, and I've always enjoyed it. It's just funny, and I like that. You know, I generally like my kills to be a little creepy too, but in the Leprechaun franchise, you can get away with just being funny, and they managed to do that right here. I also love every single line the Leprechaun does. That's probably the best part of this kill, and actually, you know what? We're bumping it up to A. This stands out for the franchise for sure, at least to me.
Your boobs are big, your butt is small, but still you're in for quite a fall.
I love his lines. Anytime that he's about to enhance something, whether it's her lips, he hits us with the line.
Those delightful lips, they'll get you some tips. But what about these? Are they big enough to please?
Or if it's her butt, he hits us with the line.
A delightful little slut. But what about your butt?
And then her breast, he hits us with another line.
Oh, what didn't you hear? Bigger is good, but jumbo is dear. I'll give you boobs that come out to here.
So I just really enjoyed that, and when you put all that together, it's A tier. And if you want to compare it to the rest of this movie itself, it's S. It's that much better than the rest, in my opinion, but we're not doing that, and we're going to keep it in A tier. Back at the pawn shop with Scott and Tammy, she finds the medallion, and when she lifts it up, Cody has the same reaction to it that the leprechaun did. Scott then gets this overwhelming feeling that there's something inside the shop that he just needs to have. He heads down to the basement where he finds the safe and opens it with magic that he now possesses. Tammy tells him that they should destroy it because the video upstairs said that if you destroy the gold, it will kill the leprechaun. However, Scott is dead set on keeping the gold himself because the inner leprechaun in him is taking over. But one good slap from Tammy brings him right back to reality. The leprechaun then comes down to the basement to confront them, and Scott pulls out the coin, wishing that the leprechaun was encased in cement at the bottom of the ocean. However, this does nothing as the leprechaun's gold cannot be used to harm him. Scott throws the gold coin, distracting the leprechaun, giving Tammy just enough time to pick up a baseball she sees and knock the leprechaun down with it. They head upstairs to leave the pawn shop, but Tammy smartly grabs a medallion before doing so. Tammy brings Scott to the hospital as he's clearly not in good shape, and then we see the leprechaun sneaking in wearing a, I guess, clever doctor's disguise. As they're checking on Scott, Tammy is left in the waiting room, and then we hear someone call her down to the morgue over the PA system. Thinking this is Scott dead, she's clearly distraught.
Please report to the morgue. Oh no. Tammy Larson. Please Report to the morgue.
When she heads down to the morgue, she sees someone sitting in a chair and goes to talk to him, but he spins around only to find out that he's been stabbed with 5 different tools and killed by the leprechaun. So the 6th kill, and like I said, we're quickly getting into kills at the end of the movie. I don't even think this guy had a name. He's just a morgue's assistant, I believe. It's going to be poorly executed. D. Should be cut from the movie. It's definitely not as bad as these two, because at least there's something there. We see more meaning in this kill from a guy that we've known for like a minute than these two dudes who have kind of been here for most of the movie. I like the idea of him being stabbed with a bunch of different mortician's tools. I think there was like a scissor and a scalpel, or a scissor, a pair of scissors, a scalpel, and some other stuff. I think it was 5 total, and that's also what the wiki lists. But it's an off-screen kill. And I don't generally like those unless they're done very, very, very well and surprising, and this just wasn't. This was easily predictable from the leprechaun calling her down to the room, when you see him sitting in the chair, you just know he's going to spin around and be dead. You just know. Maybe back in 1995 when this was released, you didn't, but again, maybe you did. Also, we've already kind of seen this before, if you remember from the original Leprechaun, when Jennifer Aniston's character goes into the nursing home, the leprechaun spins around in the chair when it was supposed to be Mr. O'Grady. I know it's kind of different, but we're seeing a theme here where they're just reusing the same elements over and over again from the first 2 movies, and I just don't care for that. That's why it's poorly executed. I get why this was needed, because to trick her to go down to the morgue, I like that. I just wish it was on screen. I wish you saw him get killed. You didn't need the surprise of the spin chair. It's whatever. Definitely not cut from the movie. Shouldn't go anywhere above this. Poorly executed. However, I'm not going to put this above Mitch's, because at least Mitch's was on screen and you saw something. So it goes below Mitch as well. Down here as well, I'm going to change this real quick and put Tony's above Art's, because at least Tony got his eye ripped out. After she gets the surprise of seeing the mortician's assistant dead, the leprechaun appears from the sheet and ties her down to one of the metal tables. However, as all of this is going down, we see that Scott has freed himself by also using magic. The leprechaun goes to cut off Tammy's nose, but before he can do so, Scott comes in to save the day.
Renegade, before I make you eat that blade.
He and the leprechaun proceed to have a battle of comedic lines, but Scott eventually sets Tammy free with magic, and she shows the medallion to the leprechaun, scaring him off where he goes to get his coin from Fazio the magician. As Fazio is performing his new act for a pretty decent crowd now that he's the world's greatest magician, the leprechaun appears from the locked box, and somehow we then cut away and cut back and Fazio is inside of the locked box. The crowd starts cheering for the leprechaun to cut him in half because they believe this is just, of course, all part of the show. Fazio proceeds to grab the coin and wish himself away, but it doesn't work because he's already used the one wish that he gets for that one coin. And because of that, the leprechaun proceeds to cut him in half with a chainsaw, and it's actually pretty gory for the Leprechaun franchise. We are now 7 kills into this movie, and most of them have sucked. But this one is a breath of fresh air, to say the least. It's gonna go above the rest, at least these bottom ones. I just don't know whether to put it with Loretta or put it below. I think ideally it would be somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna put it in B for now, because I do like that Loretta. That Loretta kill was a nice blend of comedy with, I wouldn't say gore, but cool effects with her blowing up. This one, however, was pretty dang gory, especially with the Leprechaun franchise not really being known for gore and not being known for their kills, per se. This one was cool. A lot of gore. You've seen his guts hanging out, blood splurting everywhere, and I love the fact that he died. Much like Mitch, he was an asshole, and it was just nice seeing him get what he, quite frankly, deserved. Loretta was a bitch too, but she wasn't nearly as bad. You kind of felt bad for her at times, especially with Mitch giving her crap and Fazio giving her crap. These two, however, good riddance. It was also poetic justice seeing him die in his trap. I did really enjoy that. I think the only thing, and you know what, I'm going to keep it on B. I'm not going to bump it up to A, and there's one reason why I'm going to do that, and I'm convincing myself of this reason only. I don't know how he got inside the box. Like, one scene, we see the leprechaun appear from the box, and they're having a discussion. Then we cut away to something else, and then once we cut back to the stage, he's just inside the box. I don't know how he got, did the Leprechaun say, hey, get inside the box for me? If so, why did he do that? I just, that part is like a plot hole that I don't think they really thought through, but I'm thinking it, and it's not making sense to me. So for that reason, I'm going to keep it at B. But like I said, it's a fringe A tier, but my bias towards Loretta's kill can't let me do that, and I've just put into my mind a good reason why I can't. So, amazing kill when you consider the field. Borderline A, but not quite there. Love the gore, love the poetic justice element, and just love seeing his ass die. And then pretty much immediately after that kill, we get our 8th and final kill of this movie. Scott and Tammy come in on stage and they tell everyone to get out because this dude is a maniac, and they all run and flee the casino in fear. Scott tries to attack the Leprechaun, but when he does, the Leprechaun disappears. Tammy picks up the coin and tries to use the wish, but the Leprechaun knocks it out of her hands. Scott picks up the magician's flamethrower and tries to burn the gold, but the Leprechaun begs Scott to come join his side as he's kind of his weird, sick brother in a way. The Leprechaun tempts him with the pot of gold, offering to share it with him. However, Scott doesn't cave, and Tammy reminds him that the power of the Leprechaun is in his gold. He then uses the flamethrower on the pot of gold, setting it ablaze, which causes the Leprechaun to also be set on fire and go flying through the air. The final kill of this movie, like the second one, was on the Leprechaun, and it was pretty good. There was nothing too crazy here. It wasn't bad. It was pretty predictable, though. You could kind of see it coming with the hints of the movie playing, or the video that they were watching saying you got to destroy him through his gold. It's not too predictable, but kind of. Although I did really like the Leprechaun being burned. That was a very cool image. I just don't know whether to put it in C or B. If it's in C, it's definitely above Gupta's, although I think it's way above Gupta's. Which now makes me want to put it in B. This is kind of one of those fringe B to C, but I really like the imagery of the Leprechaun being burned and melted and flying through the air. It was cool. So I'm going to put it in B, but I'm going to put it pretty significantly behind Fazio's kill. So there's definitely a big gap between them, but it's still, I think, much better than Gupta's kill to be in C, so it's going to go in B tier. And that is the final kill tier list for all of these kills in this movie, and if you compare them to the last two movies, this movie had much more kills. Not better kills, though. I think the first movie had 4, the last one had 6, this had 8. 2 of them were in F and shouldn't even exist. 2 were in D and needed a lot of work. 1 was pretty average. 2 were good, and 1 was pretty damn amazing. Not really what you want to see from a tier list like this. Now, for my final takeaways of this movie. The first positive, much like the first 2 films, is Warwick Davis. Again, he's awesome in this movie. I don't like how this is more comedic. There's really no creepy element to this one at all. It's more just comedy. I like the comedy they bring, I just wish there was more creepiness to it. However, I did read somewhere that this was actually Warwick Davis's favorite film in this franchise because of the comedy, and I guess when you're the actor and you're able to get, to do more like that, you would enjoy it more, but as a viewer, so far out of these 3, it's by far my least favorite. I also really enjoy how the Leprechaun just kind of fits in Vegas. That's why I said at the beginning, this is actually one of the bright spots of the movie, how he just casually strolls through Vegas like it's just normal to see a little leprechaun walking around every day. It's pretty funny. I also like the interaction that he had with the Elvis impersonator, even though it was brief. There's also one scene where he's like trying to hitchhike a ride, and I just think that's funny. Him dressing up as a doctor, going into the morgue. The way they did the comedic elements, I think it really did fit for Las Vegas and the Leprechaun franchise. That, however, is just about it for the positives that I can think, unless you want to go with like Loretta's kill and stuff like that, but we're kind of sticking to the plot and stuff. First negative, it will go back to the comedic element. While the comedic element was a positive, I don't like how there was no creepiness. I mean, the only thing remotely creepy was Fazio's death. And other than that, there's really nothing. It's just a comedy movie. And I get that that's kind of what the Leprechaun franchise is, but I want some creepiness with it. Also, this whole movie just doesn't make sense. How's the Leprechaun alive? Like, at the end of the last movie, he was blown up. And that's fine, you can resurrect him. Jason came back to life how many times? I'm cool with that. But how? Give me some explanation. There's no continuity. He was blown up in the last one, and this one, he's just a frozen statue with this new medallion that suddenly keeps him frozen. I like the element of the medallion. It's cool. But I want some explanation to it. They didn't explain it at all. I also don't really care for Scott's acting a lot. He's not bad, and a lot of the acting in here is actually pretty decent. It's serviceable, and a lot of it's actually good. I like how Fazio's kind of just this asshole magician. Loretta's character is pretty good. Mitch, again, plays this cool asshole. Gupta's character is really cool, too. He kind of reminds me of Morty in that greed aspect, but Scott, for some reason, just... It wasn't bad. I just think he stood out as the worst of the bunch. There's some scenes that just kind of had me scratching my head, kind of like Bridget in the second movie. Like, whenever he stumbles upon the dead pawn shop owner, he's just like, oh, a dead body. Like, you wouldn't be freaking out. I don't know if it's like the greed getting to him because he's gambling and he's just thinking about that. You can make that argument, but it's not a huge negative. It did stand out to me in some situations during this movie. Also, the lore has just completely changed. Like, we still have the element of the leprechaun. He's greedy. He likes his gold. But, like, they don't really tie in any of the shoe element. I think there's one scene where he does something with a guy's shoe, maybe. But I did like that in the previous two. But it's just over, like, instead of, like, catching the leprechaun and getting 3 wishes, like the original lore is, and like it was in the first 2 films, now you get 1 wish for every gold coin you have. They're just changing things for the sake of changing things, and there's no continuity there. While there's more comedy, again, it's just not as creepy. It just doesn't... It's kind of what you expect when you get to the 3rd film of this franchise. They're just basically recycling elements for the first 2 and trying to make them a little bit different. But they just lost that perfect blend of creepy and comedy, and I think they tried to go way too hard in the comedy area. It did work in some cases, like Loretta, but it didn't work in others for me. There's also this line from Art where he asked the leprechaun what Judy Garland was really like, and at first I chuckled because, Munchkin's leprechaun, but when you know the history of what really happened on the set of Wizard of Oz and what Judy Garland went through, it's really distasteful, and I don't know if it was meant to come off like that, but to me it did.
Tell me, what was Judy Garland really like?
That is my overall outlook on this movie, guys. If you enjoyed it, be sure to drop a like and hit subscribe for more content like this, and please be sure to let me know in the comments what you think about this movie and this franchise as a whole, and where would you rank these kills at?